All right, welcome to our first PowerPoint. Basically, these slideshows or these PowerPoint presentations are going to be additional information, or I'm going to elaborate what's in the text. All right, so let's begin by looking first at a very common idea behind interpersonal communication, that we do it because of needs. Um, a guy by the name of Maslow argues that we use interpersonal communication to fulfill a hierarchy of 5 needs in our daily lives. You can see those there on the right. He used a pyramid, in this case a triangle, to represent that. At the bottom, you've got physical needs, things like food and shelter. Above that, security needs, feeling safe. Above that, social needs, having other people in your life, having a social network. Above that, ego needs, more self-esteem needs, so feeling good about yourself. And above that, when you have all of the other things taken care of, you can worry about self-actualization needs, making the world a better place or fulfilling your greatest passions in life. You cannot move up on the pyramid until you've gotten the foundation below it. So if you're going to work on your self-esteem, if you don't have any sort of a social network, no matter what that is, you don't feel secure or safe, and you're not getting enough food, there's no way, Maslow says, you can worry about ego or your self-esteem. So basically, if you don't have the thing on the bottom, you can't move up. All right, that's the theory here behind Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you'll come across this in a lot of different disciplines. So this is a good thing to commit to memory and to know pretty well. Moving on, the textbook talks about the communication model and gives two models, or actually gives one model. I'm giving you two. This is a little different than the one in your textbook, although we'll look at that one as well. What I like about this one is that it breaks parts of the model into different pieces. You've got your source on the left and your receiver on the right at the top, and then the circle goes around, and then the source at the bottom transmits to the receiver, and it goes in a circle. Okay. The source, as you can see on the left, encodes information, an idea that's in the source's brain. She puts that into words. Okay, that's typically how we encode, into words. You can encode into images with a camera, I suppose, but typically we're thinking words. And then you transmit those through a channel. That channel might be through the telephone, a face-to-face conversation, an email, or a text, any number of things. And then that message packet is then sent across. The message might be the words, "How are you?" to the receiver, and the receiver then decodes it, and they translate "How are you?" into what that means, right? Because "How are you?" is three distinct words. Together, in English, they mean, give me an assessment of your personal being, your well-being. Okay. Now you see noise and interference in between the source and the receiver. Noise can come in two parts, and it's really important that you understand the two different parts. There's internal noise and external noise. Okay. Internal noise, things that you're thinking about. You're hungry, you had a bad day, you're thinking about your ex-girlfriend or boyfriend or something. But they're also external, so outside of you. Could be simple noise, like the sound of a horn going by or a dog barking. It could be subtle, it can be extreme. All of these things interfere with your ability to hear a message. Okay? If we follow around this circle, you see that the receiver then gives feedback to the source. Okay? Now that feedback also gets encoded into a message and decoded, etc. And that feedback can come in the form of words that are spoken face to face, or most commonly in the form of nonverbal communication, such as lifted eyebrows, shake of the head, a shrug, a grunt, or any number of things like that. And then, as you can see, that receiver then becomes a source and says something back. Okay, so it's a continuous loop according to this interpretation of the model. Okay, the accepted model today is a little bit different from this, and your textbook has a really great image, which we're going to go to next. Here we have another example of the communication model. It's got everything the other one has, but some more. Okay, most importantly, a couple of things here. The arrow in the middle is bidirectional, meaning the communicators, note they're not called source and receiver anymore, the communicators are communicating both ways all the time. So it's not that the receiver waits for a message and then gives feedback. No, they're communicating to each other all the time. Doesn't matter. If you're speaking to me, I'm going to be giving you feedback in the form of my facial responses and other things that I'm doing. I might say, mm-hmm, I might interrupt you. Okay? Likewise, when I talk back to you, you're going to send me messages as well. Okay, so it's bidirectional. That's really important. Another thing that this model shows that I really like is you've got these two shapes that are shaped like, Stewie's head from the Family Guy, okay, or two footballs if you prefer. And these two footballs overlap. And in that place they overlap, that's where A's environment on the left in purple and B's environment, which is clear, that's where these two environments overlap. And in that space is where people can understand each other. Okay, for example, A comes from the West Coast and he played football at a small high school, right? And then B is a soccer player from New England, and she was on a big team and they had big games and whatever. Okay, they're both athletes. They're both exceptional athletes, say. And when they talk about sports in general, they understand each other, right? They may not understand each other's sports exactly, but they understand each other when they're talking about sports and games and the lead up to a game and practicing for a game, all of that. However, when A's environment, the football player, starts talking about suiting up before a game and getting all amped up, and all the football players are hitting each other on the shoulder pads and really kind of getting tough, that might not make any sense to B, who is again a soccer player. I played soccer and we never got amped up like that before a game, but I had friends who were football players and that's how they got amped up. So they won't understand each other in that regard because their environments don't overlap. Now they could come to understand each other, but that would take A explaining to B the background. Okay? So it doesn't mean people can't communicate, it just means they have to develop a shared environment. Right? You can understand why people that might be from different countries, different cultures, speaking different languages, would really have to work hard to develop a mutual environment like that shaded area in the middle so that they could have a place where they could communicate with each other. Okay? A lot of people refer to this as common ground, and this graphic really shows that well. The common ground is in purple and white diagonal lines. Okay? I think that's about it here for the communication model. The communication model is going to be the focus of your first critical exercise, and so we won't really go into too much more here. All right, a couple other things that I wanted to draw your attention to is a few ideas here. One, interpersonal communication is dynamic. It's constantly changing over time, right? It's never the same. Anytime two people talk to each other, it's always going to be different. Okay? There are a lot of variables in it, so it's ever changing. And the other idea is that it's primarily dyadic, meaning it's generally involving two people. Right? You can have interpersonal communication with more than two people, tends to not be that interpersonal. In this course, we're going to be using largely the qualitative definition of interpersonal communication. So that the idea that there'd be more than two people, like a group of 6 or 8 people, doesn't fit too well. Typically, people are getting close and really opening up to another person, really taking the time to get to know them. It's one-on-one. And the last one is changes the participant's thoughts, behavior, emotions, and relationship. That speaks for itself. All right, and our last slide here, I just wanted to bring up, for those of you who are maybe interested in going on to study communication further, or just to give you a basic idea of the field of interpersonal communication. There's a few issues, areas that are gaining attention, and notice it says 5 issues there. It should say 4. Apologies there. 1, understanding cultural differences. Okay, that speaks for itself. The next is gender and sexual orientation. Oh, excuse me, I guess that's where I got the 5. Putting them together there. So based on how people identify themselves in terms of their gender or their sexual orientation will shape their nature of interpersonal communication. There are different fields developing around these 2 areas. Online communication, why we use it, the effects of it, that's another area being studied. And the final one, the dark side of interpersonal relationships, is a field developed by Brian Spitzberg, who is a doctor in the communication department at San Diego State University. So that's pretty cool. You can work with him if you like. And that's looking at literally the dark side. People that lie, why we lie, why we might manipulate others. Typically the things that don't get a lot of study or used to not get a lot of study. That's the dark side of interpersonal relationships. And that's about it.